Listen, I've seen a lot of weird things in my 16 cycles at the Galactic Military Institute. I've watched Throxian cadets accidentally set fire to their own tentacles during plasma training. I've seen a Valorian eat an entire hoverbike on a dare. I've even witnessed Professor Keltmore sneeze so hard he teleported 3 floors down. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for the day the humans showed up. My name is Vex, by the way. I'm a Corthian, which means I've got 4 arms, blue skin that shifts to purple when I'm annoyed, and a generally superior attitude about most things. At least, I thought I had a superior attitude until that particular morning in advanced combat theory. It was the 3rd week of the semester. We were all settled into our usual spots in the amphitheater, a massive circular room with gravity-adjusted seating that spiraled up toward the domed ceiling. I was sitting with my usual crew, Mira, brilliant Quentari with too many eyes and an addiction to caffeinated gel pods. Jek, a hulking Drafesh whose idea of strategy involved hitting things until they stopped moving, and Lorna, a serpentine Xylithian, who could calculate battle trajectories in her sleep, but couldn't tell a joke to save her life. Professor Harkin was mid-lecture, his holographic displays showing the infamous Battle of Proxima Drift, when the door hissed open. Now, nobody interrupts Harkin. The guy is 7 feet tall, covered in ceremonial scars from the War of 7 Systems, and has a stare that could make a black hole blink first. But the figure that walked through that door, she didn't even seem to notice his glare. She was small, absurdly small by our standards. Maybe 5.5 feet, if you were being generous. She had this wild mane of dark red hair pulled back in some kind of tactical knot, kink the color of Terra's desert sand, and these unsettling green eyes that seemed to process everything at once. She wore the standard academy uniform, but something about the way she moved, calm, loose, aware, made every predator instinct in the room sit up and pay attention. "You're late," Harkin rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. The human stopped, tilted her head slightly, and smiled. Not a nervous smile, not an apologetic smile. A smile that suggested she found the entire situation mildly amusing. "Traffic was murder," she said in perfect galactic common, though her accent was strange, clipped and efficient. "Also, your campus navigation system sent me to a waste recycling facility twice. Might want to update that." You could have heard a pin drop in vacuum. Mira's eyes all widened at once. Jek's jaw literally hung open. Even Lorna stopped her constant calculating murmur. Nobody talked back to Harkin. Nobody. The professor's scarred face twitched. For a moment, I genuinely thought we were about to witness an execution. Then, impossibly, he gestured to an empty seat in the front row. "Cadet Ellis, take your seat. Try to keep up." She walked down the steps with this easy confidence that made no sense for someone who'd just arrived at the most prestigious military academy in 3 galactic arms. She dropped into the seat, pulled out a data pad, and looked up at Harkin expectantly. "As I was saying before the interruption," Harkin continued, shooting her one more warning glare, "the Battle of Proxima Drift is considered the textbook example of tactical failure. Commander Thixiel had superior numbers, superior firepower, and superior positioning, yet he lost 70% of his fleet in under 2 hours. Can anyone tell me why?" Hands, tentacles, and various appendages shot up across the room. Harkin ignored them all, his gaze fixing on the human. "Cadet Ellis, you've been here for 30 seconds. Enlighten us." Oh, this was going to be good. I leaned forward, my skin shifting to an entertained shade of violet. The human was about to get absolutely demolished in front of 300 cadets. It was almost sad, really. Ellis didn't even look at her datapad. She just stared at the holographic battlefield rotating above us, her expression thoughtful. "He thought he was fighting a battle," she said finally. He wasn't. He was being hunted. The room went quiet again. Different kind of quiet this time. Harkin's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "Look at the debris field positioning," Ellis continued, standing up and walking toward the hologram without asking permission. She reached up, her fingers dancing through the light display, zooming in on sections of the battlefield. Thixiel arranged his fleet in a standard defensive sphere, textbook formation. Logical, safe, predictable. But his enemy didn't engage the sphere directly. They hit supply lines here, here, and here. She marked 3 points that glowed red. Then they went silent for 6 hours. The Xylar ambush, someone muttered from the back. Not an ambush, Ellis corrected, not even turning around. A test. They were studying how Thaxiel's fleet responded to stress. When he tightened his formation to protect the supply runners, they knew he was a defensive thinker. When he sent out scout patrols in groups of 3, they knew he was following Academy doctrine. When he refused to split his forces, they knew exactly how to kill him. She manipulated the hologram again, and suddenly the battle played out in fast forward. The Xylar forces appeared as red dots, scattered and seemingly random, while Thaxiel's blue sphere held formation. Then the red dots swarmed, not at the sphere but around it, cutting off retreat vectors, escape routes, reinforcement lanes. The blue sphere held for exactly 14 minutes before it collapsed inward like a dying star. They didn't want a fair fight, Ellis said softly. They wanted prey. And Thaxiel gave them exactly what they wanted, something that would hold still long enough to be killed. The silence that followed her explanation felt heavy, oppressive. I realized my skin had shifted completely purple without me noticing. Mira had stopped chewing her gel pod halfway through. Even Jack looked thoughtful, which was terrifying in its own way. Harkin studied the human for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Take your seat, Cadet Ellis." She walked back down and sat, pulling her datapad up like nothing unusual had happened. But I noticed her hands. They were steady, not a single tremor. Most cadets would be shaking after that kind of spotlight performance. She looked bored. Harkin resumed his lecture. But nobody was really listening anymore. Everyone was stealing glances at the human. This tiny newcomer who'd just casually dissected a famous military disaster, like she was commenting on the weather. When the class finally ended 2 hours later, there was a rush toward the human's seat. Everyone wanted a closer look, wanted to introduce themselves, wanted to understand what they'd just witnessed. But Ellis moved fast, slipping through the crowd like smoke and disappearing out a side exit before anyone could corner her. "Did that actually just happen?" Mira asked, all 6 of her eyes blinking in different patterns. "I think a human just schooled the entire academy," Lorna hissed, her scales rippling with something between respect and concern. Jack cracked his massive knuckles. "I want to fight her." "You want to fight everyone?" I pointed out, though I was just as intrigued. "But yeah, that was insane. Who shows up late to Harkin's class and then drops analysis like that?" We made our way to the cafeteria, still buzzing with speculation. The entire building seemed to vibrate with gossip about the human. Apparently, she'd been transferred from some classified Earth military program. Apparently, she'd requested late entry specifically to skip the easier preliminary courses. Apparently, she had some kind of special dispensation from the Galactic Council itself. Apparently. Nobody actually knew anything. We grabbed our food. Mira's was something that looked like it was still moving. Jack's was approximately his own body weight in protein slabs. Lorna's was a thermal soup that steamed and hissed, and mine was a relatively normal grain bowl, with spiced vegetables, and headed to our usual corner table. That's when I saw her. Ellis was sitting alone at a table near the massive observation window, eating something from a small container she'd brought herself. She was reading something on her datapad, completely unbothered by the hundreds of eyes watching her from around the room. "Should we go talk to her?" Mira asked. "Absolutely not," Lorna said immediately. "She's clearly dangerous. Or clearly smart," I countered. "And smart is useful." Before anyone could argue, I grabbed my tray and walked over. My friends followed, because of course they did. We're stupid that way. "Mind if we sit?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Ellis looked up, those green eyes assessing us in about 2 seconds. Then she shrugged. Free galaxy. We sat. Awkward silence followed. Jack solved this by shoveling food into his face like he was preparing for hibernation. Mira fidgeted with her gel pods. Lorna just stared, which was unnerving, coming from someone with vertical pupils. "That was impressive back there," I finally said. "The thing with the battle analysis, it was obvious," Ellis replied. not looking up from her datapad. Harkin was testing me. Late arrival human special entry, all that gets attention. He wanted to see if I'd fold under pressure, or if there was actually substance. So I showed him substance. Just like that? Mira asked, all her eyes wide. You weren't nervous? Terror is expensive, Ellis said, taking a bite of whatever was in her container. It smelled weird, vaguely like burned plant matter and spices. Can't afford to waste energy on it when there are things to do. What are you eating? Jack asked, momentarily distracted from his own mountain of food. Curry, Ellis said. From home. The cafeteria food is nutritionally adequate, but tastes like recycled Starship hull. She wasn't wrong, though I'd never thought about it that way. So why'd you come here late? I pressed. Everyone knows first weeks are for building alliances, learning the campus, getting ahead on coursework. You're already behind. Ellis finally looked up, and there was something in her expression that made me reassess every assumption I'd made about humans being soft, simple creatures from a backwater planet. I'm not behind, she said quietly. Everyone else is just moving slower than they need to. And that's when the alarms went off. Red emergency lights flooded the cafeteria. The announcement system crackled to life, speaking in harsh, urgent galactic command. All cadets report to defensive stations. This is not a drill. Repeat. This is not a drill. Unknown hostile vessels approaching campus perimeter. All cadets to defensive stations immediately. The cafeteria erupted into controlled chaos. 300 cadets moving at once, grabbing weapons from emergency lockers, forming up into their designated squad positions, heading toward assigned defensive points. The academy drilled us constantly for this exact scenario, though nobody really believed it would happen here. This was the safest, most heavily defended location in the sector, except it was happening. I turned to say something to Ellis, maybe make a joke to cut the tension, and found her already moving. Not panicking, not running, moving. She'd secured her datapad, was checking the Hermes weapon locker nearest our position, and was watching the crowd flow with those calculating eyes. Ellis, I called out. What squad are you assigned to? She looked back at me, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she smiled properly. It was not a reassuring smile. I'm not, she said. Special entry, remember? No official designation yet. Then you need to get to the shelter level, Mira said, her voice rising with stress. Unassigned cadets go to protected zones during emergencies. Yeah, Ellis said slowly, pulling a plasma pistol from the locker and checking its charge with practiced ease. I don't think I'll be doing that. Before any of us could respond, she was gone, sprinting toward the stairs that led up to the rooftop defensive positions. Not the shelter, not safety, the place where the actual fighting would happen if those hostile vessels got close enough. Lorna hissed in frustration. That human is going to get herself killed. Wojciech said thoughtfully, watching Ellis disappear up the stairs. She's going to do something incredibly stupid that somehow works. I looked at my friends. We all shared the same thought. We're going after her, aren't we? I sighed. Absolutely, Mira confirmed. This is a terrible idea, Lorna added. Yep, Jack agreed cheerfully. And so, instead of going to our assigned defensive stations like trained, disciplined military cadets, we grabbed weapons and chased after the tiny human who'd been at the academy for less than 4 hours. This was either going to be the best decision of our lives, or the thing that got us all expelled. Probably both. The rooftop defensive platform was absolute bedlam when we arrived. 50 cadets were scrambling to man plasma cannons, energy shields, and targeting systems, while 3 instructors barked orders over the screaming alarms. The sky above us had turned an ugly shade of orange, atmospheric shields straining against some kind of electromagnetic interference. Through the flickering barrier I could see them. 5 vessels, sleek and dark, moving in formation patterns I didn't recognize. Those aren't standard raiders, Lorna hissed next to me, her thermal sensors flaring. Those are military-grade hunter ships. Crevatar design, maybe, but modified. What are they doing here? Nothing good, I muttered, scanning the chaos for Ellis. Found her. Of course she was at the primary targeting console, arguing with Instructor Vexner, a battle-scarred Thokin veteran who once held off an entire boarding party with nothing but a damaged pulse rifle and what he described as severe irritation. "Cadet, I don't care what special privileges you think you have," Vexner was saying, his four mandibles clicking in agitation. "This station requires level 5 clearance and 3 months minimum training." "Cool, great, understood," Ellis replied, her fingers already dancing across the console. "But your targeting algorithm is compensating for gravitational drift using last month's planetary positioning data. We shifted 0.3 degrees in orbital axis since then. Every shot you fire is going to miss by approximately 40 meters at this range." Vexner's eyes narrowed. "That's impossible. The system auto-updates. The system has a corrupted data packet in the navigation subroutine," Ellis said, not looking up. "See? Right there. Someone tried to patch it badly after that solar flare 2 weeks ago. I can fix it in 90 seconds or you can keep missing and we can all die together. Your call, instructor." The nearest enemy ship fired. A lance of superheated plasma scorched across our shields, making the entire platform shudder. Someone screamed. The smell of ozone and burned circuitry filled the air. 60 seconds, Vexner growled. Ellis's hands became a blur. I'd never seen anyone interface with a galactic military system that fast, and I'd been training on them my entire life. Code scrolled past on the display so quickly it looked like a waterfall of light. Mira leaned in next to me, her multiple eyes trying to track what the human was doing. "That's not possible," Mira whispered. "She's rewriting core targeting protocols on the fly. That requires accessing 3 separate encrypted systems simultaneously. Nobody can process that fast. Humans are supposed to be slow," Lorna added, her scales shifting to an alarmed yellow. "Slow reflexes, slow processing, slow adaptation. That's what all the briefings said." "Maybe the briefings were wrong," Jack suggested, which was probably the smartest thing I'd ever heard him say. "Done," Ellis announced, stepping back from the console. "Fire solutions are now accurate. Might want to actually use them before those ships get inside minimum engagement range." "Just a thought." Vexner stared at the display, his mandibles spreading in what I'd learned to recognize as shocked approval. Then he slammed a fist down on the firing control. The rooftop cannons roared to life. 3 perfectly placed shots hammered into the lead enemy vessel's shield generators. The 4th shot punched straight through its weakened defenses and tore a chunk out of its engine assembly. The ship listed, trailing atmosphere and debris, falling back from formation. "All stations recalibrate using updated targeting solutions." Vexner barked into his comm. "Someone get me tactical analysis on those remaining 4 ships. I want to know what they want and how to make them regret showing up at my academy." "They're after something specific," Ellis said, her eyes fixed on the holographic display showing ship positions. "Look at their movement pattern. They're not attacking to destroy. They're probing, testing response times and defensive coverage. They're searching for weak points." "Weak points to what?" I asked, moving closer despite every survival instinct telling me to find cover. "To get inside," Ellis said simply. "They want something on campus. Something important enough to risk attacking the most heavily defended military academy in the sector." Another blast rocked the platform. This time one of the shield generators blew out in a shower of sparks. Cadets scattered. Instructor Vexner was already redirecting power, but I could see the math. We had maybe 10 minutes before the shields failed completely. After that, those ships could land troops, and then we'd be fighting deck to deck through the corridors. Ellis was still staring at the tactical display, her expression distant. I recognized that look. I'd seen it on the faces of the best strategists during wargame simulations. She was running scenarios, calculating possibilities, seeing moves the rest of us couldn't even imagine yet. "They'll breach at Section 7, she said suddenly. "The Xenobiology Research Wing. Oldest part of campus, lowest shield density, and it backs up to the canyon, which gives them a retreat path if things go wrong." "How could you possibly know that?" Vexner demanded. "Because that's where I'd breach," Ellis replied. She turned to face us, and there was something different in her eyes now. Something harder. "And because that's where the artifact is stored." Every person on that platform went still. The artifact. Nobody talked about the artifact. Officially, it didn't exist. Unofficially, Everyone knew the Academy was guarding something incredibly dangerous, something recovered from a dead civilization in the galactic core, something that had made the Galactic Council very nervous and very secretive. How do you know about the artifact? Vexner asked quietly, his hand drifting toward his sidearm. Ellis met his gaze steadily. Because Earth didn't send me here to take classes, instructor. They sent me here to help protect it. And right now, someone very determined is trying to steal it. Well, Jack said into the shocked silence. That explains the special entry. Another explosion, closer this time. The shield was failing faster than expected. Through the gaps in the flickering energy barrier, I could see one of the enemy ships breaking formation, angling down toward exactly where Ellis had predicted. Section 7. The Xenobiology Wing. Vexner made a decision. Ellis, you're with me. The rest of you cadets, maintain tense positions and follow standard protocols. With respect, instructor, Ellis said, already moving toward the stairs. Standard protocols are why they chose today to attack. They've studied your responses, your patterns, your doctrine. If we respond exactly how they expect, they win. We need to do something unpredictable. Such as? Vexner asked, following her. Ellis grinned, and it was the most terrifying expression I'd seen on a face that small. Such as letting 4 unassigned cadets and a human with no official combat training do something catastrophically stupid that nobody could possibly plan for. She looked back at us, at me, Mira, Lorna, and Jack. You 4 coming or what? I promise it'll be more interesting than standing here waiting for the shields to fail. I should have said no, should have followed protocol, maintained my position, been a good soldier. But I'd spent my entire life being a good soldier, following rules, doing exactly what was expected. And where had that gotten Commander Thexiel at Proxima Drift? I said. Absolutely insane. But yes. Mira added, this violates approximately 16 regulations, Lorna hissed. I'm in. Jack just cracked his knuckles and smiled. Vexner looked at all of us, his expression unreadable. Then he pulled 5 emergency combat harnesses from a storage locker and tossed them to us. If you die, I'm failing you, eushumously. If you succeed, I'm still probably going to discipline you. Clear. Crystal, Ellis said, already strapping on her harness. We ran through corridors filled with cadets heading to defensive positions, past instructors coordinating shield rotations, down 3 levels and across the main quad where the decorative fountain had been drained to create an emergency water reserve. The Xenobiology Wing was on the far side of campus, a 20-minute walk normally, but Ellis set a pace that had even Jack breathing hard. So what's the plan? I gasped, my forearms pumping to keep up. Get there before they do. Set up an ambush and make them regret every life choice that led them to this moment. Ellis replied, not even winded. How was she not winded? That's not a plan. That's a goal, Lorna pointed out. Fine. Detailed plan. The Xenobiology Wing has a ventilation system that runs through the ceiling. Old building, big ducts. Built before modern climate control. We go in through the roof. Access. Position ourselves above the artifact vault. And hit them when they're focused on breaking through the security doors. They'll have us outnumbered, Mira said. Probably, Ellis agreed. But we'll have high ground surprise and something they won't expect. What's that? Jack asked. Ellis's smile was sharp. We reached the Xenobiology Wing just as the enemy ship descended through the damaged shields. It was smaller up close, built for speed and insertion rather than prolonged combat. The hull was scarred and modified. Definitely not standard military issue. Pirates, maybe, or mercenaries, either way. Professionals. The ship landed hard in the courtyard, its boarding ramp already dropping before the engines fully powered down. 12 figures emerged, armored in black combat suits with no identifying marks. They moved in perfect formation, covering angles and advancing with the kind of precision that comes from serious training or serious combat experience. Probably both. Roof access, now, Ellis hissed, and we followed her up an emergency ladder that clung to the building's exterior. The roof was a mess of old solar collectors and atmospheric processors. Ellis found the ventilation access in under 30 seconds, somehow knowing exactly where to look. She popped the grate and slid inside without hesitation. The rest of us followed, trying not to think about the fact that we were crawling through dusty metal tunnels toward a fight with professional soldiers while armed with basic training and absolutely no plan beyond hit them from above. This was definitely going to get us expelled. If we survived, the ventilation system opened into a large research lab, now cleared of equipment and converted into a high-security vault. In the center of the room sat a cylindrical containment field, and inside that field was the artifact. I'd never seen it before, nobody had except the highest clearance personnel. It looked like a simple metal sphere, maybe 2 feet in diameter, covered in markings that seemed to shift and change when you looked directly at them. It was also the most frightening thing I'd ever seen. Just being in the same room made my skin want to crawl off my body and hide. "That's what they're after," Mira whispered, all her eyes fixed on the sphere. "That's what everyone's after," Ellis replied quietly. "It's a navigation key to the core territories. The dead civilization that built it mapped every stable jump point, every habitable system, every resource-rich asteroid field in 50,000 light-years. Whoever controls that sphere controls expansion rights to a third of the galaxy." "How do you know all this?" I asked. Ellis gave me a look. "I told you, Earth didn't send me here for classes." Below us, through the grated ventilation cover, we could hear the attackers breaching the outer doors. Plasma cutters screamed. Metal groaned. They'd be through in minutes. "Positions," Ellis whispered, directing us to different vents overlooking the vault. "Jack, you take the left flank. When I give the signal, drop down and cause chaos. That's your specialty, right?" Jack's grin was feral. "I can do chaos. Mira, you're on tech disruption. See those power conduits?" Ellis pointed to cables running along the walls. "Hit them with pulse charges. Kill the lights, scramble their helmet displays, make them fight blind." Mira's appendages were already pulling demo charges from her harness. "On it." "Lorna, thermal coverage. They'll have night vision and heat sensors. I need you to flood the room with thermal flares. Make it impossible for them to target accurately." Lorna nodded, her scale shifting to a determined orange. "What about me?" I asked. Ellis handed me something small and cylindrical. A grenade, but not any type I recognized. "When everything goes to hell, which it will, throw this at the containment field." "What does it do?" "Emergency containment lockdown. It'll seal the artifact in an impenetrable stasis field for 72 hours. Nobody gets it, including us, but at least these mercs go home empty-handed." "And what will you be doing?" Ellis checked her plasma pistol, her expression distant. "Something my instructors back home taught me. Something humans are apparently very good at, which is..." She looked up at me, and her eyes were cold. "Controlled violence." The outer doors exploded inward. The mercenaries poured through, weapons up, moving in textbook tactical formation. They spread out, covering the room, advancing on the containment field with practiced efficiency. Their leader, identifiable by slightly different armor, stepped forward. "Bypass the security protocols. We have 4 minutes before Academy security responds in force." That was our cue. Mira hit the power conduits. The lights died instantly. In the sudden darkness, I heard confused shouts, the whine of charging weapons, the click of night vision activating. Then Lorna dropped her thermal flares. The room exploded into a wash of heat signatures, 100 false positives blooming across every scanner. More shouts, now tinged with panic. Then Jack dropped from the ceiling like a meteor with anger issues. The first mercenary didn't even have time to scream before Jack's massive fist caved in his helmet. The second managed to fire, but Jack was already moving, using the first body as a shield and a weapon simultaneously. It was absolutely not what they taught at the academy, and it was brutally effective. Chaos achieved. I dropped down next, firing my plasma pistol at muzzle flashes and dark shapes. Hit 1, maybe 2, hard to tell in the confusion. Lorna was somewhere to my right, her serpentine form moving through the darkness like a nightmare. And Ellis? Ellis moved like she'd done this 1,000 times before. She dropped into the middle of the mercenary formation, too close for their long rifles to track effectively, and became a whirlwind of calculated violence. Every move was efficient, economical, designed to disable and disarm. She wasn't fighting to kill, she was fighting to control. 2 minutes later, it was over. 11 mercenaries on the ground, unconscious or groaning. The 12th, their leader, was pinned against the wall with Ellis's pistol pressed under his jaw. "Who sent you?" Ellis asked calmly, like she wasn't covered in other people's blood and her own bruises. The mercenary laughed, a wet, pained sound. "You think you've won? This was a distraction, little human. While you were playing hero, the real team was hitting the secondary vault. They have the backup data core by now. All the artifacts' navigation information, copied and transmitted. You protected an empty prize." Ellis stared at him for a long moment. Then she smiled. "No, we didn't, because there is no backup data core. The artifact can't be copied. Its information is quantum-locked to the physical sphere. Anyone who told you there was a secondary vault was lying to you." The mercenary's eyes widened behind his cracked visor. "That's impossible. Our intelligence was perfect." "Your intelligence was fed to you," Ellis said softly. "By us. We knew someone would try for the artifact eventually. So we created a fake vulnerability, a false backup system, and waited to see who was stupid enough to take the bait. Congratulations. You just helped us identify your entire organization." She stepped back and I saw Instructor Vexner emerging from the shadows with a full security team. He'd been there the whole time, watching, waiting. This whole thing had been a trap, and we'd been the bait. Or at least, Ellis had been the bait. The rest of us were just dumb enough to follow her. "Nicely done, Cadet Ellis," Vexner said, his mandibles clicking in approval. "Though your methods were highly unorthodox." "Orthodox doesn't catch clever enemies," Ellis replied, holstering her weapon. "Sir?" Later, much later, after the mercenaries had been secured and the academy lockdown had been lifted, and we'd all been thoroughly debriefed, the 5 of us sat on the roof of the student residence hall, watching the sunrise over the campus. My skin had finally shifted back to its normal blue. Mira had stopped stress-eating gel pods. Lorna had stopped calculating probable punishment scenarios. Jack looked disappointed the fighting was over. "So," I said finally, "you knew the whole time? The trap, the plan, all of it?" Ellis nodded. "I was briefed before I arrived. The late entry, the dramatic entrance, it was all designed to draw attention, make me look like a soft target, someone the mercenaries could exploit to time their attack. They'd been watching the academy for months, waiting for the right moment. I was supposed to be that moment." "You used yourself as bait," Mira said, somewhere between admiration and horror. "I used us all as bait," Ellis corrected. "Couldn't have pulled it off without you 4 doing something unpredictable. The enemy had planned for standard academy response. They hadn't planned for a random group of cadets going completely off script. Speaking of which," Lorna hissed, "we definitely violated multiple regulations. Punishment is inevitable." "Probably," Ellis agreed. "Worth it, though. We stopped a major intelligence breach, captured an entire mercenary cell, and proved that sometimes the best strategy is to be too stupid for the enemy to predict." "That's not actually a compliment," I pointed out. "No," Ellis said, grinning. "But it's accurate." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the campus slowly return to normal below us. Students emerging from shelters, maintenance crews repairing damage, life continuing. "Hey, Ellis," Jack said eventually. "Back in the vault. You said humans were good at controlled violence. What did you mean?" Ellis was quiet for a moment, staring at the sunrise. "Humans spent 10,000 years fighting each other on a single planet before we ever reached space. We got very, very good at war. But more importantly, we got good at knowing when to fight and when to stop. Control. That's what separates a soldier from a killer. The ability to use violence precisely, efficiently, and then to turn it off completely when the job is done." She looked at each of us in turn. "You all have that. I saw it tonight. You fought hard, fought smart, and the second it was over, you didn't keep fighting. That's rare. That's valuable. That's what makes you more than just cadets. That makes you warriors." Coming from anyone else, it would have sounded cheesy, overdramatic. But coming from the human who just orchestrated an elaborate counterintelligence operation while fighting off professional mercenaries, it sounded like truth. So, Mira said, all her eyes bright. What happens now? Ellis stood, stretching muscles that had to be screaming after the night we'd had. Now we go to class. I'm already late to advanced combat theory, and I hear Professor Harkin really hates that. We all laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet campus. And that's how I learned that humans aren't slow, aren't weak, aren't simple. They're just very, very good at making you think they are, until the exact moment it matters most. Also, never ever interrupt Professor Harkin's class. Some risks just aren't worth taking. Even for humans,